Oh man, I've been so excited to bring you this because that is an Alfa Romeo Tonale and this is the United Kingdom. In fact, it's the car park for the Red Line pub, which means I'm about to bring you a fresh verdict for how Alfa Romeo's new machine drives on UK soil. But before we get to that, it'd be really nice if you could click the subscribe button down there and like this video to help support our new channel. Right, let's get driving it.
Yes, this is our first chance to gauge what Alfa Romeo's only electrified car yet is like on UK soil, and while this particular press model is left-hand drive, it's dressed in high specification Veloce trim, which is expected to be extremely popular with British buyers. It builds on the mid-spec TI trim with gorgeous Teledial 20-inch wheels and metallic paint, and under the bonnet is the higher grade version of Alfa Romeo's 1.5 litre petrol engine, which is the only engine available at launch. Like the 130 horsepower entry-level model that should start from about £38,000 when the Tonale goes on sale, this 4-cylinder car works with a 48-volt mild hybrid system, but here it has 160 horsepower and 240 Nm of torque. Pretty punchy. This front-wheel drive setup promises close to 50 miles per gallon of fuel economy, and it can tow up to 1.5 tons of brake trailer. But Alfa Romeo believes its rival to the likes of Audi's Q3, BMW's X1 and Jaguar's E-Pace will lure buyers over with its looks, interior and handling. And on first impressions, all of those things look very, very good.
So while the exterior borrows some design cues from legendary models like the SZ of yesteryear, the interior is pretty much all new. In fact, I think it is all entirely new, especially when it comes to the technology on offer, starting with this new 10.2-inch touchscreen sat in the middle of the dash here. It is a joy to use. It's fast, its graphics are smartphone-like, it's responsive, everything works exactly how you want it, and it takes some buttons away from the interior, cleans it up a little, but crucially, Alfa Romeo have kept physical buttons for the climate control. Thank you, Alfa Romeo. So much better to use than the fiddly digital stuff you get on other cars. I'm looking at you, Volkswagen. And also, you get a manual control for your volume down here, which I'm really, really happy to see. Oh, and this Tonale introduces a new digital instrument cluster. Alfa Romeo has not done that before, and while it's not as customizable as some rival systems, it is really lovely. In fact, with these retro dials, I think it might just be my favorite one out there. And actually, the interior as a whole is a really nice place to be. It's really well finished, soft touch materials, nice leathers, and you get loads of kit. You get a wireless phone charger in here, lots of storage space, and I really like the prominent positioning of this drive selector control up here. And of course, the aluminium shift paddles here, which feel lovely to use. In fact, I want to get using them on the road, so should we go drive this thing? So this is our first go in an Alfa Romeo Tonale in the UK, potentially the first go for anyone in the motoring press. And I always like to introduce my cars and start my test talking about the ride, because in the UK, we have such unique tarmac, and while people have been driving Tonales on the continent, they've given their verdicts. Everyone who lives in Great Britain knows that what really matters is how it deals with our very unique road system over here, which is why the roads I've come to today up in Warwickshire, just outside the Red Line pub, a lovely stop off if you want some lunch. It's why these roads over here have a great mix of everything, and I brought the car here because I really want to know just how it deals with British tarmac, especially when it's equipped with the 20-inch wheels that this car has as an optional upgrade. That should make its life a little bit more difficult because it's a bigger wheel, there's less tyre. But you know what? In the few minutes I've been driving this car, I've been very impressed because the car does ride nice and confidently. There are bumps and cambers and everything on this road system here, but it's been pretty composed, and even the road noise isn't too loud. There is a bit of road noise, the tyres are quite wide, but it's nothing significant, and it does just feel like a very well put together machine over these bumps. The best thing as well about this particular car that we have, because it's spec'd up quite nicely, it comes with adaptive dampers, which basically means you can change your settings, and you can do that right here with this control, which is located just to the right of my knee. In UK spec cars, when you're sitting on the right of the car, it'll be just to the left of your left knee, of course. But it'll be the same thing, and it means you can switch between the DNA controls, which effectively give you your normal mode, which is for the N, D being dynamic, and then A being advanced efficiency in this car, because it being a mild hybrid, there's a big focus on efficiency, of course. And it means that when I switch between the drive modes, I can play with the dampers as well. So if I put it into dynamic mode, which gives me my most responsive accelerator response and just sharpens up the engine and gearbox, which we'll talk about in a minute, it means I can switch the car back into its softer suspension mode. And that is key for British drivers, because having a stiff car in the UK can be a nightmare. But thankfully, Alfa Romeo has ensured that you can soften this off. And that's not because they care about us Brits, I'm sure they care a bit, but it's because Italian roads are also quite bumpy. The knock on though is that it means this car does ride nicely, and going around bends, it feels sporty. Alfa Romeo promises that this car is the sportiest car in its class. It's got a 50-50 weight distribution, which basically means the weight is split evenly across the front and the back of the car, and that's a pretty impressive feat for a crossover like this, for a small SUV, because, well, they're not sports cars, are they? It's very hard to get the packaging right to ensure that that's the level of balance you have, and yet they've done it here. They've got a perfect 50-50 weight distribution. It's still a front-wheel drive car. The engine and all the main stuff's up at the front, but yet it feels really composed, goes around corners and flows very nicely with this road, even on the bigger wheel that we have here. I'd instinctively say that you're better off sticking with the 19-inch wheels you get with this car as standard, but my God, the 20 inches look pretty good, don't they? In fact, they look fantastic. Goes around corners, nice. It's the steering, actually, that just gives you that sense of agility. This has the fastest steering rack. It means it has the most reactive steering in the class. No one else has really bothered to try and give you an overly sporting steering system, but Alfa Romeo has tried to make this the car's unique feature, and it is. It does feel quick, and it feels how some of the other Alfa Romeos feel, Giulia and Stelvio included. When you turn the wheel, there's a really quick reaction at the front of the car. That said, there isn't really anything in the way of steering feel. This is an electronically assisted steering rack. Pretty much everything this side of McLaren's is these days. And it does mean that when you steer, you don't feel loads of information through the wheel itself. You are just driving mostly with your sight and the feelings you have through the car. But, I mean, if I attack this corner here, it just turns so confidently. It really is confidence inspiring, and the car doesn't roll around. If I ensure I'm in the softer setting here on the suspension, there's still a nice amount of composure. The car corners relatively flat with a nice amount of body roll. So it feels sporty, but not overly so. And I think that's pretty much spot on. It's where it needs to be, because let's face it, this is a car that's going to carry families, it's going to carry weight around. You don't want it to be fidgety and overly bumpy. As far as the ride and steering are concerned, this is a nice thing to drive. What about the way this thing goes down the roads? Well, it's got 160 horsepower and 240 newton meters of torque in this slightly higher version of the 1.5 mild hybrid system. You can get a lower powered model, and you will soon, at the end of this year, be able to get a full plug-in hybrid model, which has a slightly smaller engine, but much more electronic oomph, and it means you'll have 275 horsepower. For now, 160 horsepower. Yeah, it moves, it shifts, you know, you can get up to the speed limit, no problems whatsoever. Alfa says it will do 0 to 62 miles per hour in 8.8 seconds, and I totally believe that. It feels that nippy, but it's nippy, that's the key word. It's not quick, it's not a sports car in a straight line, whereas around the bends it does feel nice and engaging, it handles really sweetly. In a straight line, it's more about momentum, it's more about efficiency, all of the things you'd expect from a mild hybrid. The engine itself as well is really quiet. In fact, you can barely hear it unless you put your foot down. And for most people, that will be a good thing. When you do hear it, a little bit drony, little bit groany, it doesn't sound particularly muscular or interesting. Clearly they haven't tried to do anything with that. There's no exhaust note whatsoever. So it's just an engine, isn't it? But it does the job. Very fuel efficient if you let it cruise around. And the key thing for this, and if I switch it back into the advanced efficiency mode, not only does it sip fuel to a claimed 50 miles per gallon, but actually the engine just switches off entirely when you're going around really slowly, and you can just run around on electric power when you're cruising at very low speed or edging around car parks or edging around in traffic. And that's not something most mild hybrids can do. That's a hybrid thing. We have to remember this is just a mild hybrid. So the fact that the petrol engine won't start up if you're just cruising through traffic. That's pretty unique, not only in this class, just across all categories for a mild hybrid. And that does mean that if you're driving in a lot of traffic every day, you should save a lot of fuel, which is really good. Now, this car only comes with an automatic gearbox. It's an 8-speed auto, but it is controlled by these lovely paddles here, which I can go on about for ages and ages, because so many paddles these days are just so boring. They're just like little pieces of plastic you click. But these are nice aluminium paddles, which sound really good. They just feel really nice to use. And the gearbox in this car, if I give the car a fighting chance by putting it back in dynamic, so it's at its most reactive, the gearbox does react pretty quick. Nowhere near the quickest, but it's quick enough. It does react to your inputs up and down the gearbox, especially when you're going for it. If you put your foot down in dynamic mode and then you ask for a quick upshift, it will give you it pretty quickly. Same with if you hit the brakes and you downshift, it's pretty quick. It's a bit more hesitant when you're driving around if you put it back into auto mode. And if you just drive around in the sportier mode, it's a bit hesitant. It doesn't kind of know where it wants to be at moments. But if you drive in a way that works with the car, and you can quickly learn the car's characteristics, then actually it's a really good gearbox and it works perfectly well. Another thing we should talk about in this car is the regenerative energy technology, because like a proper hybrid, it captures energy and puts it back into the battery to enable that battery to be topped up enough so you can cruise around in those traffic moments without turning the engine on. So it means if I touch the brake or I come off the accelerator, it will actually be regenerating and putting energy back into the tiny little battery that the 48-volt system uses. And I think they've done a good job with that. Pedal regulation is nice and smooth. It's really easy to just drive it normally. You don't really think about it. It all happens in the background, which is exactly what you want with this kind of car. So overall, I do think there is a really good car in this Tonale. I don't think we're quite there yet with this particular specification. I think it looks fantastic, but I just don't think with this engine, this mild hybrid setup, that the car feels quite where it could be, simply because it's just not as responsive when it comes to engine and accelerator response as it is when it comes to the way the car goes around bends. It rides and steers nicely. So I think with a bit more oomph, a bit more power, and just faster reactions from that accelerator pedal, I think we could really have something that is very appropriately sporting for an Alfa Romeo. Now, while nobody, not even Alfa Romeo, will tell you that this is a proper SUV, it is very obviously a family crossover, which means it has to do family things. So let's get checking out how practical it is. So in the back it is pretty similar, as in it's really nice. In fact, the materials and the fit and finish back here feel just as good as up front. You get a few harder plastics, but generally speaking, it's a really nice place to be. And it's quite spacious. Plenty of room for 2 6-footers or close to 6-footers like myself. Loads of leg room here and a lot of headroom up here as well. And you could definitely get 3 kids or 3 teenagers to sit next to each other. You get your own vents in the back, a couple of USB ports to add to those in the front. And this central armrest down here has a couple of cup holders, as well as a little ski hatch through here to put whatever you want through there. So generally speaking, really nice place to be. As for the boot, you actually get loads of space. There's 500 litres of room in here. Not quite the class leader, but pretty close. And you also get a very deep amount of storage under the floor here. There's loads of room to hide stuff, and this floor itself can be put into a couple of positions. But even with the floor in a position with the least space available, there's still loads of room in here. In fact, I don't really have to think very hard when loading our family of suitcases into the boot here. So much room, so easy to do. And there's another interesting thing about this car, enabled by its Amazon Alexa technology. It means you can order and receive packages directly to your Tonale, which means the courier can come, securely open the car, throw your packages in, and then lock it up for you. That's pretty cool, isn't it? And certainly a much better option than having them thrown behind the plant pots. So that concludes our first drive of this brand new Italian car on UK soil. There's a lot to like about the Tonale. It handles nicely, it looks excellent, and the interior is a really nice place to be. That 1.5 litre mild hybrid engine is very economical, although I think the best is yet to come. I think when we meet that 275 horsepower plug-in hybrid car, which is coming towards the end of this year, that's when we're going to get to see the best that the Tonale can offer. I can't wait to drive that car, but for now, if you like this video, remember to click that subscribe button and of course, like this video. We've got so much more content coming up, we're actually ramping up the output, so we hope you can join us for the ride. See you soon.